The United States is officially involved in a militarized dispute with Russia, and not just any type of dispute. It is of the nuclear kind, or maybe even the nuclear kind. We will sort that out in a minute. But yes, this is serious, and it is more than just vague threats with equally vague deadlines, as has been the hallmark of the Trump administration so far. Moreover, it is an interesting contrast to the Biden administration's deliberate approach to Ukraine, which often looked for any way it could find to try to reduce the escalation risks with the Kremlin. And it is also an interesting contrast to Trump himself, or at least an earlier version of Trump, who, only 5 months ago, was chiding Zelensky for playing games that could spin out of control and turn into World War III. Well, for Trump, apparently now it's time to play the game. This is a weird story, so let me try to break it down for you before this indeed degenerates into a global catastrophe. There are two main characters wrestling for power today. Trump, you all know of. Opposite him in the squared circle is Dmitry Medvedev, currently the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. Quite a mouthful. He is a longtime compatriot of Vladimir Putin's, going back to a period even prior to when they looked like this, and photos were blurrier and grainier. You may be more familiar with his time as president of the Russian Federation from 2008 to 2012, but president, with air quotes, might be a better way to describe him. You see, there was a weird era when the Russian constitution forbid Putin from running for another term. It was also a time when Putin had not yet consolidated power across all sorts of institutions, which would then outwardly allow him to change the constitution and run again. That would not be until years later. But there's always a plan B. Medvedev became president, and Putin shifted over to the role of prime minister. Nevertheless, few in the West doubted that Putin was still pulling the strings behind the scenes. Medvedev did not quite have the pedigree of a world leader, so he kept the seat warm until his term ended, and Putin was constitutionally allowed to have another non-consecutive term in office. And at that point, the authority officially transferred back to Putin, even if he never truly lost it. Fast forward to today, and Medvedev no longer has the power of a head of state on any level. He instead operates as a well-known bureaucrat within the Kremlin. His latest evolution, at least from the perspective of Western audiences, has been to comment on Twitter, and then later X, about the strength of Russia's position in the war in Ukraine. Okay, that is the backstory. Now we can get to the current saga. Are you ready? Then let's go. Flashback to July 14th. Trump announced a new plan for NATO countries to purchase weapons from the United States, which would then allow for more arms to be forwarded to Ukraine. I covered the backstory of why Trump's attitude was changing as it related to the war in my last video. But for now, the key point is that Russia's repeated strikes on Ukrainian cities had turned into a bit of a personal betrayal from Trump's perspective, and it did not help that the Polish consulate had been struck in one such assault about a week beforehand. Trump also announced that, should there not be some real progress on a ceasefire, he would implement a new sanctions package in 50 days. These are the secondary sanctions that would actually raise tariffs on countries still purchasing Russian energy exports, mainly India and China. That, in turn, would hit Russia with an economic sledgehammer, starving the Kremlin of the key funds that it needs to continue the war effort in Ukraine. And to pull back the curtain for a second here, when the nuclear submarine story broke, I was literally about to start recording a 40-minute analysis about why it is a serious bill with serious consequences that Trump may just implement despite all sorts of empty threats in the past. Heck, Medvedev even joined the choir on that point. Given the number of red lines and empty threats coming from the Kremlin during the war, though, it was a real pot meets kettle moment. I will save all of the reasons why these sanctions seem different than the typical Trump timeframes for the next video. For now, the next key moment was on July 28th, at this summit between Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Without prompting, Trump announced that he was going to cut the deadline to 10 or 12 more days. That would be an odd proclamation if Trump's original plan was to stall for time. And yes, it comes with the usual caveat of saying that there is a deadline is not the same as actually imposing sanctions. But Medvedev did not take it well, posting on X that Trump's playing the ultimatum game with Russia. 50 days or 10, he should remember two things. 1. Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. Side note, I have no idea why Medvedev would compare Russia to Israel. The United States is not fighting Israel. Quite the opposite. Iran makes sense given that the United States recently bombed one of Iran's key nuclear facilities, and the operation was relatively easy because Iran had no air defense to speak of, in contrast to what would be the case if the White House ever ordered something similar against Russia. Back to Medvedev. 2. Each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war. Not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Don't go down the Sleepy Joe road. We have seen other world leaders adapt to Trump's style of rhetoric as a means of getting the president into a deal-making mood. And it has worked when the language is coming from a friend. Mark Rutte has been very successful with that. Telling Trump not to repeat Sleepy Joe's strategy was Medvedev's way of duplicating this sort of behavior. But this was not the move of a cerebral assassin that Medvedev thought it would be. On July 31st, Trump wrote on Truth Social, "I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together for all I care." Note, this is referring to what would happen in the event that Trump triggered the secondary sanctions, and India refused to comply. Trump would then impose 100% tariffs on all Indian exports to the United States, which would kill a significant portion of the $88 billion in annual receipts headed to India. Back to Trump. We have done very little business with India. Their tariffs are too high, among the highest in the world. Likewise, Russia and the USA do almost no business together. Let's keep it that way. And tell Medvedev, the failed former president of Russia, who thinks he's still president, to watch his words. He's entering very dangerous territory. Not to be outdone, Medvedev responded on Telegram. The post was in Russian. I am using the English translation. If some words of the former Russian president cause such a nervous reaction in the entire formidable US president, it means that Russia is right in everything, and will continue to go its own way. And about the dead economy of India and Russia, and entering dangerous territory, well, let him remember his favorite films about The Walking Dead, as well as how dangerous a dead hand that does not exist in nature can be. The bit about a dead hand is an explicit nuclear threat. A dead hand device is designed to automatically fire nuclear weapons at a target if specific conditions are met. That assures a second strike capability even if all of your leaders have died and are now conversing with the King of Kings. The automatic nature of a dead hand also eliminates any optimism that the other side will chicken out when it comes to retaliating to a nuclear strike. If set up properly, it is supposed to deter the first attack from happening at all. On August 1st, Trump responded on Truth Social. Based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important, and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Well, I would point out that words are not particularly important here, but the actions matter, and this is an action. War is all about control, and if you can take it. Repositioning your chess pieces not only gives you more options in a particular region, it also signals that you are willing to pay the costs of the deployment, which is something that a country would not do if the leader did not care at all about the issues at stake. We see this all the time with aircraft carriers. What is ambiguous in the post, though, is what kind of submarines these will be. Nuclear submarines could just be nuclear-powered craft, which are harder for enemies to track because they do not need to surface as often. But it could also mean a submarine equipped with nuclear weapons, which would make more sense given the context of this conversation. They can hold ballistic missiles, which strike similar to how an intercontinental ballistic missile might operate, except the opponent has no idea where they are coming from. Now, to be clear, I do not think that we are moving into Cuban Missile Crisis territory right now. But even posturing actions, not mere verbal threats, but real movements, are cause for concern. If something spirals out of control, even one nuclear weapon fired at a major city by accident or otherwise would lead to an incredible number of casualties and economic damage. So I do not think that we should get out a shovel and bury this story quite yet. Undoubtedly, you will hear a lot of talk about how Trump is doing this as a way to take the media's attention away from all things Epstein-related. And it is also worth noting that it will be incredibly hard to verify submarine movements, given that the entire point of them is to be invisible. But none of that changes the fact that a war is going on. And right now, you can feel the celebrations in Kyiv that another barrier to a more serious intervention from Trump has been broken. To be clear, a couple of submarines will not radically alter the balance of power between the United States and Russia. As I said a moment ago, the submarine-launched ballistic missiles mimic what an ICBM can do. Unless a crisis actually starts to unfold, and nuclear bombs are hitting US soil, the subs do not provide much extra power. It is actually a different story if they are attack submarines propelled by nuclear power, even if those seem relatively tame. They create strike options on Russian assets that are available right now that would otherwise not be available. Regardless, this is another step in what is becoming a pattern of Trump moving away from a fruitless period of negotiations with Russia and onto something that may be more productive, a better peace for Ukraine through military strength. Meanwhile, if you want to learn more about how we got here, I have 2 words for you. Spaniel's books. They are awesome and they do not suck. Check the video description for more information about them. And if you enjoyed today's video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.